there. My name's Emma. And when my son left me to live with his rich stepmom for money, I taught him a huge lesson. Remember to post your unique title ideas in the comments below. Give a like to the ones you want to see animated. If your suggestion does well, we'll include you in our special Discord server. All right, back to the story. Danny has always been a lazy, spoiled child. That's probably partly my fault. When my husband and I had our only son, we wanted to give him the world. And so I worked hard and long. I worked late into the night and even on weekends just to give him everything he could ever need or want. But even then, Danny always seemed to want more. I drove 50 miles just to give him the console he wanted for Christmas, and it was an extremely hard thing to get. It was sold out in every store I went to. By some luck, a friend managed to help find me one 2 towns away, and though tired from an entire week of overtime at work, I still drove the distance just to make my son happy. But when he opened his present on Christmas Day, he looked at me with such anger and resentment on his face. "You got me the digital version! I wanted the disc one! This is worthless!" "But, sweetheart, it's the only one I could find. They don't have them in any of the stores." "I don't care. I don't care if you had to go all the way to Japan for it. It's the wrong one. How am I supposed to display the games I'm going to get if they're downloaded? If my friends come over and they see I have no games on display, they're gonna think I have no games at all, and I'm poor. And besides, you only got one controller. How will any of my friends play with just one controller?" "But it's here now, sweetheart. And you can still enjoy it, can't you? You've been telling me how much you wanted one for weeks." "Your son says it's the wrong one, then it's the wrong one. You barely get to see him and you upset your only son on Christmas morning? What's the point of you?" "I want to go back home. I bet Denise has a better gift for me." "We'll go home soon, son. And now didn't I tell you to call her Mom?" "Gross! She's too young to be my mom." "Watch your mouth, boy, or I'm gonna tell her. Come on, back to the car." "So soon? We haven't even gotten to have Christmas lunch." "What? That store-bought ham you have on the table? Ha ha! No, thank you. Denise got us catering, and besides, we'll be late for the party. You'll see your son again next Thursday. And this time, don't be late. You're always working, and somehow you're still poor. I'm so glad I left when I did." And just like that, I was alone for Christmas. Will left me a couple years back when, while he was working as a waiter, he met Denise. One look at the shiny earrings she had on and he decided he was done with struggling and having to work. And so he left me in the middle of the night, taking Danny with him. We got a divorce and the rest was history. We agreed we'd get shared custody and responsibility, but for years, Will and Denise had only spoiled Danny, while I got to bear the burden of paying for his important expenses. While I was paying for his tuition, Denise built him a kitted-out treehouse. While I was breaking my back raising money so he could get new clothes and an allowance, Denise took him to amusement parks and bought him all the latest toys. No wonder he grew up being so spoiled as he is. He never saw what it took just for him to have such a good life. He never saw his mom toiling away just so he could enjoy what he had. And Denise had maids. So, of course, the kid never learned to do any chores. Whenever Danny would visit me for some weekends and I would ask him to do dishes, he'd stomp all the way to his room and call his dad to come pick him up. Not once did he ever offer to help me with anything. And what's worse is that because he got used to getting all the nice things from Denise, that's all he will accept now. He refuses to wear the clothes I buy him because it's not a famous brand. When I cook for him at home, he complains that Denise always takes him to fancy restaurants. And all day, all night, All he ever asks me to buy for him are new games. But don't you still have hundreds of games you haven't finished? So? I want this one because it just got out and I want to show my friends. If you don't buy me this game, I'm calling Dad. What was I supposed to do? I wanted so much to teach him life lessons, but if I did, he'd just hate me even more. So I caved in. Denise and I didn't see eye to eye, but we were civil with each other. After all, I wanted my kid to grow up happy and taken care of. Fighting with the woman who stole my family from me wasn't gonna help anyone, even though I despise her to my core. But lately, things have just been getting worse. And if Denise and Will don't do anything to correct his attitude, I fear Danny might grow up completely dependent and ill-equipped to face the real world. And seeing as his dad is equally as spoiled and bratty as he is, I can see why he hasn't changed. One day, as my son was on a weekend visit with me, I noticed that he was in a fouler mood than usual. Is anything wrong, Danny? Don't act like you don't know. What? I'm sorry. Have I done something? Have you done something? For weeks now, all the clothes I'm getting from you are crap. It's like you got them from a rummage sale or Goodwill. And what's up with the sneakers you sent me? They have holes in them. Holes! Your internet sucks, and the only computer in this house can't even run Swinecraft. Seriously. At Denise's house, she has a MacBook Pro, and I get to use it all the time. Honestly, coming around here blows. I finally broke. I don't understand how anything he said made sense when I was working 2 jobs just to afford the clothes he said he liked. And I put in 2 weeks of overtime just so I could have enough to buy him that pair of Air Gordons. And now the child I tried so hard to give the world to was shouting at me? I shouted back. Do you have any idea what I do just to buy you nice clothes, huh? Or to feed that greedy gob of yours till you're stuffed? I work 2 jobs, and I'm there when your dad flies off on some stupid holiday with Denise and he dumps you on me. So I'm sorry if I can't buy you everything you want all the time, but I wasn't born into a wealthy family, and I'm doing my best. Excuses? All you have are excuses. Mom, I'm calling Denise to pick me up. I'm gonna tell her to adopt me so I can live with her full time. I watched my son leave without a word to me. I worked so hard for so long just to make sure he lived a comfortable life. And in the end, he chose someone else to be his mother. In the end, money won. When Danny got in Denise's car, Will shot me a smug grin, as if to say it was his plan all along, to take away my son, so he can say goodbye to ever being associated with me. And then it hit me. The child support money. Since the court determined that Will now has more money than me, he was to give me child support, especially since Danny was spending more and more time at my place due to the fact that my ex and his new wife were going on more and more holidays. And now that Danny was to live with them, it meant Will wouldn't have to send me a single cent. It was never about Danny. He just wanted to stop sending child support. I took them to court. As soon as Will and Denise lost the custody battle, they started taking it out on Danny. They yelled at him constantly. Will even went so far as to tell him to start paying rent. The day that Danny was supposed to be handed over to me was still a week away. But when Danny refused to pay rent, he was kicked out of Denise's house. That was how I found him, waiting by my garage door as I came home from work, wet from rain and crying. They didn't even let me take my things. I continued to unpack my stuff from the car, barely glancing at him, ignoring his dramatic reenactment of what happened. Mom, are you even listening? They chucked me out. This is abuse. Why aren't you saying anything? You brought all this on yourself. For a second, I saw the fear in Danny's eyes. Real fear. Perhaps he finally realized that if I turned him away as well, he'd be left alone in the world. I love my boy no matter what. He's my son. And no matter what he did in the past, he's still my flesh and blood. If you're gonna live with me, there has to be some rules. 1, you get what you get. I will pay for school, food, and basic clothes. But if you want any luxuries, you have to get a job to pay for them. 2, you will learn how to do chores around the house. 3, you won't be getting any allowance. If you act up, I'll take away your phone. If you talk back to me, I will take your computer. I will no longer tolerate you being a spoiled brat, you understand? Yes, Mom, I promise. I'll be good. Just please let me stay. But it wasn't long before Danny was back to his old self. I tried to discipline him, but before I could even get him to change, Dennis and Penny passed due to an accident. And that resulted in Danny inheriting an incredible amount of money. As soon as he could, Danny left and got himself a penthouse. He blew through his inheritance as if it was infinite. He bought himself all the toys and games he wanted. He threw parties and bought fancy cars. He never learned how to cook. He ate at fancy restaurants for every single meal, every day. One day he realized he'd run out, and that bills still needed paying. The bank took everything away from Danny. Confused and homeless, he came running back to me. I looked into my son's eyes and closed the door. I only hope this time Danny has learned his lesson.
Ran across the street, narrowly dodging a speeding car that zoomed past. I just couldn't believe it. My girlfriend was on the TV! I didn't even know she had something like this going on! I was just walking home from spending all day revising my novel when I heard her familiar voice. I thought for sure she was at work, but when I saw her face on the screens that lined a used TV shop, I stopped in my tracks and bolted towards it. I must have looked like a psycho. My hands and face glued to the glass window, staring intently at how pretty she looked on screen. It looked like she was being interviewed for something. And then, she reached behind her and took out a book. And everything I knew, everything I loved in the world, just died in front of me. Hi, I'm Simon, and this is how I got back on the girl who stole my novel. Do you think you have an idea for a great story? Post the title in the comments below, and give a like to the ones you want to see animated. Now, let's get back into it. Ever since I was a little kid, I've always dreamed of being a writer. But my parents wanted me to be a doctor. They said there was no money in writing. Even my friends weren't so optimistic when I told them I was gonna finally go after my dreams after years of being a surgeon. And just a little bit, I think they were right. At the start, at least. I had a hard time writing. Most of the time, I'd just sit in front of my computer staring at a blank screen. Sometimes my brain goes too fast that my fingers can barely keep up. And through it all, I was broke. I had carved a significant chunk of my savings by just focusing on being a writer. I still believed I can do it, though. I believed as soon as I finished my work, I could sell it. And then, it will all be worth it. Unfortunately, I think I'm the only one who believes in my dream. I've dated and lost so many girls who left me as soon as they realized that I was a struggling artist. It was pretty lonely for a while. Until I met Anna. Anna was a breath of fresh air. She was a dreamer just like me, and she was the only one who actually motivated me to go after my dream. She was my taskmaster. Every morning she'd wake me up with a steaming cup of coffee with a sweet, motivational phrase on a sticky note. She would plant a kiss on my forehead and remind me, one day, I'll be the wife of a really famous writer. And so, I worked really hard for her. I would plot out my book during the day, and at nights, when my brain goes online, I would write until my fingers ached. But it was all worth it. It was all for Anna. She was pushing me towards my dreams, so I wanted to make hers come true. She wanted a good, comfortable life, and I swore I was gonna give it to her. Anna was the first to hear about any ideas that brew in my head. She was my critic, my muse, and my editor in one. I would tell her what I planned to do with the story, and she would tell me whether it works or not. The best feeling for me is when I tell her a twist that happens, and her eyes grow wide out of surprise and excitement for what happens next. And after 6 months of never going out of the house and having no real job, I finally did it. I finished the most important thing I have ever done. It felt like my very own baby. And when I handed it to Anna, I had a surge of jumbled feelings. There was a pit in my stomach, but at the same time, I was brimming with joy. But then, I also felt sad because the story was over, and I missed the characters I wrote on the page. And now, I was giving my baby away for it to be judged. Anna loved it. She loved it so much she squealed and jumped around yelling how I was gonna be a millionaire. I never knew that trusting Hannah with my manuscript was the worst thing I could have ever done. As soon as I saw her bring up that book during the interview, I knew what she had done. It was no wonder she'd been coming home very late a lot, and she was off on some meetings all the time. She'd been having publisher meetings, and now she'd succeeded. The book had sold and is in print, except for the biggest, most glaring difference. Her name was where mine should have been. That scheming, thieving piece of trash sold my work as her own. And beside her on that interview was a man I looked up to my whole life. I idolized Mark ever since I was a kid. And now, he was holding my girlfriend's hands and kissing her on national TV, telling everyone he was my stolen book's editor. I was so mad I punched that glass window and shattered it. So, yeah. Now I'd been swindled out of my life's work, lost my girlfriend to my idol, and had a bill for a shop window I can't afford. On top of all that, I was flat broke. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even afford a lawyer, so I did the one thing I could. I wrote. I wrote about everything that happened. I took up a day job waiting tables, and I used every bit of time I wasn't waiting tables and devoted it to finishing my new work. It went faster this time, and I had a fire under me that made me do things I thought was impossible. In just 2 months, I finished my first draft, and I immediately went to work sending copies of it to every publisher in town. I received rejection after rejection after rejection letter. I hit rock bottom. I was out of time, and out of money. While Anna was enjoying her best life, flying from city to city promoting the book she stole and making millions off of it, I was down in the dumps, poor, and feeling like an utter failure. Until one morning, I woke up with determination out of nowhere. I told myself she deserved to be exposed. And so, in a last-ditch effort, I sent my book to Netflix. And let me tell you, I still remember the exact moment I received the email that changed my life. I was at work, holding a tray of drinks on my way to table 42. I glanced at my email, but when I saw it was from Netflix, I rushed to open it. Before I could even read it, a call came, and there was no amount of professionalism in the world that would have made me contain the insane happiness I felt at that very moment. In shock, I dropped the tray and jumped and celebrated as if I just scored the winning goal. They're doing a show about my book! Netflix is doing a show about my book! My manager came over with a sinister look on his face. That's nice, but do you mind not shouting at my restaurant? Keep your personal matters to yourself. You're causing a scene. Clean this mess up right now or you're fired. Well, up yours, Steve. I quit. Oh, and by the way, Steve, I know you've been stealing from the cash register and that you're taking all our tips. I'll make sure to mention that to the owner during my exit interview. You're not getting one! I don't care. Catch me on Netflix. If you can afford a subscription. I walked out of the place a free man. Netflix went on production pretty quickly. They told me they were eager to ride the wave of Anna's stolen book, so they released the show just as her book reached the top 10 bestsellers list. In one night, my entire life changed. Everyone recognized me on the street. My story was the talk of the town. Everyone was talking about the character in it that was so eerily familiar and similar to Anna. They hated all the betrayal that befell my character after years of working on his book. See, my story never mentioned her, but I made sure to put in every detail that would make people think it was her. In that story, everything that happened to me in real life was mirrored on the screen. I asked Netflix to do something special for me. I requested that they only release the finale on a very specific day, Anna's birthday. When the final episode of the show dropped, the world went wild. The very last 10 seconds of the show featured an after-credits scene, and in it was a photo of Anna and me during happier days, before she betrayed me. Tweets rolled in. News articles began popping up. TikToks of people shook about the revelation. Facebook posts, Instagram stories, even YouTube videos. Everyone was talking about Anna, and how she brazenly stole my work and sold it as her own. I can only imagine she was hiding away somewhere, spending her birthday in shame. Finally, I had my vindication. But that was only the beginning. With Netflix money coming in, I was finally able to get myself an amazing lawyer. I went after her new boyfriend, and her publisher. It was intellectual theft of the highest order, and I planned on bankrupting them to their very last penny. Our trial was publicized as if it was some sort of Kardashian scandal. Every news outlet was there, and when the sentence was being read out, Anna, in a desperate move, tried to run. She weaved and dodged the officers in court like an eel. She managed to squeeze past them, and she ran for the doors. But she wasn't quick enough for me. I stuck my foot out just a little and she tripped and rolled, splaying onto the floor in front of all of the cameras. I've got to say, even after millions of dollars being awarded to me by the court, the most satisfying outcome of that trial was seeing Anna's stupid face on every headline as she fell onto the courtroom floor, her hair wildly flailing behind her and her eyes wide and crazy. She's still a meme to this day, and I've never been prouder of anything.